and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and this is a special day for me and the channel because it is the 10-year anniversary of when I first started the YouTube channel way back in January the 6th, 2013. So I just wanted to do a video really to essentially mark the occasion, so to speak. I've previously asked for sort of a Q&A, questions for you guys that have asked, and you have certainly delivered, which I'll be answering in just a minute. But I just wanted to, before we get to that, is to thank, of course, every one of you who have essentially watched the videos, commented, things like this, that has helped me really kind of be motivated to do this for the last kind of 10 years. I still had hair when I first started to do this channel. Admittedly, there wasn't loads of it, but I still had some. And now, 10 years later, this is where we are. I do want to make mention of a couple of contributors that have helped me through the last 10 years. There has been actually a fair number of people that have contributed to the channel. I won't mention everyone. I wanted to mention a couple of people who have done it sort of a good amount of time consistently for a large amount of videos. And we'll start off with a couple that don't do this anymore. So firstly, Madison Mayhem, who doesn't really do a YouTube channel anymore, but she was in some of the earlier times a kind of constant contributor to the channel, and was a kind of fellow Brit horror fan. And she's sadly missed. I always hoped she'd one day go back to doing her channel where she did kind of horror movie collections and things like that. So thank you, Madison Mayhem. The next person is Buckaroo Banzai, aka Paul, who I believe was probably the earliest contributor to this channel, and of course had his own channel, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. Paul actually lived quite nearby to me, as it turned out, so I met him a good few times in kind of real life when we sort of became friends outside of YouTube. So I was very sad to hear that, obviously, the news when he passed. There's a video about that already, but so I won't talk about it too much. But again, I just want to say thanks to Paul, who obviously contributed certainly in the kind of the first kind of few years and stuff when I was doing this. And again, his channel is still up, but obviously he won't be making any more content, sadly. Next up, we've got more of the kind of the current kind of crop of people who are doing it. And next up is Aaran from Screenstars, who, outside of Paul, I think is probably the most common face you kind of see throughout the channel's history. Again, relatively kind of early kind of contributor. And I'm really happy to see that Aaran's channel is growing, and he's become a successful YouTuber in his own right, and has got a good amount of subscribers and is constantly kind of growing. And if you haven't checked out any of these people, by the way, please do go and check out their videos. So thank you to Aaran, who is very kind of similar taste to me in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate your work that you put in for the channel. He doesn't do it as much these days because obviously he has quite a big channel himself now, but I still do appreciate it when he he comes in and does it from time to time. Next up, I would say thanks to Lisa Loves. Again, she's got her own channel and she does some quality reviews for me, and I'm really appreciative of it. And Lisa, again, does the occasional review for me here and there, but she has her own channel as well, which does things like true crime as well as kind of the horror movie reviews and stuff like that. And then finally, the Professional Amateur Hour, who I won't use his real name just in case he doesn't want me to, but one of the newer kind of contributors, but certainly a consistent kind of reviewer for me. And it's nice to hear a non-English kind of contributor to this, to the channel. So thank you again. Thanks to all of you guys who have contributed to the channel and have made this a community, a legion, if you will. And that's ultimately what I wanted to the channel to be, was to have multiple opinions. And thank you to anyone else and the other contributors who have contributed from time to time as well. And with that, if anyone is interested in contributing, I'm always have the potential to add new faces to the channel. Okay, so let's get on to the Q&A section of the video. So I asked basically a couple of months ago to viewers essentially to ask me any questions, and I have been totally honest with these, so I'm glad I actually kind of decided to kind of look at these and prepare answers beforehand, because some of these questions were quite difficult and required a little bit of thought. So I believe we have actually, I've got them all written down here. There was 17 people that asked me a question, but some people have asked me more than one question, so let's get on with it. So the first one is Alex, who seems to be a big fan of Tour of Duty because he always comments on those videos. And he asked me a question specifically about Tour of Duty, which is an American TV show about the Vietnam War, which is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. So he asks, what is your favourite episode of Tour of Duty and why? And it's hard to pick one, to be honest with you, so I'm going to pick 3. My favourite episodes are, they're all from season 1, which is my favourite season, to be honest with you, and I think the majority of people's favourite season. But I would say the 2 standout seasons were The Hill and The Siege. At least that's because these both were released as kind of VHS movies in the UK, but they're both kind of big stakes, which is kind of why I like them. They feel more cinematic than a lot of the kind of the more sort of lower key sort of episodes and stuff. But there's some good character moments in there, and you know, I really kind of enjoyed those 2 episodes. But there's also one called USO Down, which to me I like because it had some really good character moments where we have essentially in the Vietnam War, there's a plane that crashes. It has these kind of like USO, like musical entertainers that the kind of Bravo company have to kind of look after. I really enjoyed that episode as well. So thank you, Alex, for the question. And moving on to Lisa Loves, and she's asked some pretty interesting questions. Just a number of questions. So as a kid, what did I want to be when I grew up? This may surprise you because it's not the typical thing that people say. I wanted to be an environmental health officer. Yes, that was my big dream. It wasn't an astronaut, it wasn't a movie star, it wasn't a football player. It was an environmental health officer. In fact, that's even where I did my work experience when I was at school. But I'll tell you the reason why. It was because of Ghostbusters. There's a character in that called Walter Peck, who is kind of like the American equivalent of like an environmental health officer. And that interested me in kind of doing a job, looking at the kind of the health and safety aspects of that kind of thing, and kind of going and checking out places to see if they were safe. And that might be a weird kind of ambition to have as a child, but that was it. So there you go. What is my favourite animal and why? This might not be a popular answer. I don't really like animals. I will say, when I say that to people, that doesn't mean if there's a puppy, I want to go and kick it. I don't dislike animals, but I choose not to really have anything to do with them. I'm actually quite allergic to cats. So I'm kind of a little bit sort of funny about most animals, to be honest. I'd rather not kind of go near them, although I'm not really tend to be too allergic to other animals. Because I'm so allergic to cats, it just kind of puts me you know, in a position where I actively try to avoid animals where I can help it. I won't go too much into this, but I also have some, let's just call it some different views in regards to pet ownership than maybe the mainstream will have. I will maybe comment on that another time. Any big life regrets? There was one, and this taught me something, I would say, it's better to regret something that you have done rather than you haven't. So this is a story of about probably nearly 20 years ago, I would say. And I used to work for a company, and I used to fancy get a girl that used to work in this particular same company, but in a different department. So I never really had much to do with her, and I didn't know her name, so I used to call her Ultimate Red because she had kind of red hair, and I didn't actually know what her name was. And I never really had anything to do with her, and I knew eventually I kind of moved to a sort of a different company, and a couple of years later there was like, she came into where I was working, and we kind of struck up a bit of a conversation, and I was single at the time, and she basically volunteered the information that she was recently single, but I was at work, so I kind of like to keep a professional stance at things. I don't like to kind of, you know, I just have that mentality. So anyway, I kind of like just poo-pooed it and everything. But like a week or so later, I went to a nightclub, and it's one where I kind of usually used to go to, and I went in there, and she's in there, and she sees me, she goes, hi, hi, and I was like, Christ, I've like never seen her before in this nightclub. I'm single, I know she's single, she's even with someone I know as well. And I thought, oh, it's like laid out for me. But I was I chickened out and I didn't do anything. And she eventually kind of left. And I always wondered, damn, you know, what would have happened had I kind of actually kind of done it. So from that point on, it kind of gave me this mentality, is it's better off to kind of like, you know, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I went up there and she goes, piss off, you dick. And it would have been bad for kind of 5 minutes, but I would have got over it. But it's, for now, it's giving me that mentality of, if there's ever a choice, I'd probably always do the thing, whatever the choice might be. It doesn't have to be with romance, but anything. But if I take it and it goes wrong, you know, I'll get over it. But it's better to try and fail rather than to wonder if it would have worked in the end. Anyway, next question is 3 dinner guests. 1 dead, 1 alive, and 1 fictional. Who would they be? Again, this is one I really had to think about. For the dead, it would be my maternal grandmother, because she died when I was reasonably young, and I never really felt like I had a huge amount of conversation with her. So I would like to have that conversation as an adult, so I could feel like I could kind of get to know her on a kind of a more of a adult kind of level, if that makes sense. Alive, I would have to refer to my previous question, and it would be Ultimate Red, because I would like to know if I was right or wrong, purely for that kind of reason, so that I could kind of scratch that off the what would have happened list. And then fictional, it would be King Arthur, because I'd love to know about his philosophy and kind of how he kind of viewed the world and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, great questions, Lisa, and thank you for that. Number 3 is William Wilson. What was the film that got me hooked on horror? Now, interestingly enough, although this channel is, I would say, primarily horror, it was, you know, horror when I was younger wasn't necessarily the kind of the main content that I consumed. I used to like any movies that had effects. So horror, science fiction, fantasy, and even action. I used to like anything which you couldn't see in real life. I used to enjoy those type of movies. Horror was part of that. But as the channel has progressed, because horror you can make relatively cheaply, there's a lot of kind of horror movies that are sort of made by independent companies. That's why I tended to review more horror. And I would say probably, yeah, it is probably my favourite genre now because I've consumed so much of it. But when I was younger, it was part of the kind of the bundle of kind of anything genre really. But if I had to say what horror films specifically stood out to me, I can think of 2. When I was quite young, my family were my parents, my mother was watching Creepshow, Stephen King's Creepshow, and I wasn't allowed to watch it, so I crept downstairs and I watched it through the gap of the door. You know, just literally kind of like watching it. They didn't know I was there, so I was kind of watching Creepshow. So that was kind of one of my first kind of experiences watching, you know, a more adult film, so to speak. But the one that stands out to me, I would say, that truly kind of sold it to me, was Evil Dead 2. And this is one of my favourite films of all time. And I watched that film, and I watched it before watching the original, I think. And it blew me away. It really did. I mean, I just fell in love with that kind of the characters and the movie, and I wanted to consume more films like that. And the ending of that film, to me, is one of the best endings of any film. So thank you for the question. Number 4, we have Truth Seeker. Have I ever wanted to write, direct, or act in a film? It's never been like a major thing that I've kind of wanted to do, to be honest with you, because I have no experience in that. It was never an intention really. However, that being said, There was an instance where I reviewed a film, a low-budget independent movie from a UK film company, and I didn't give it a very favourable review. And the director got in a little bit of a huff with me, shall we say, and was messaging me, and they said, well, you couldn't do any better. And I was like, well, I'm not a filmmaker. But then I was like, I bet I could. I don't like to be, if I'm challenged, I kind of like to respond. So I started to think about what I would do with limited resources, and I came up with an idea that I still haven't done anything with, to be honest with you. I have kind of written a treatment for it, but it obviously requires some investment and some time and people who are willing to kind of do it. So as of yet, it's an idea, so maybe one day. What is my favourite? Hang on, is that the same person? Yes, it is. Sorry, next question from the same guy. What is my favourite film with only one character or actor? I'll be honest with you, I can't think of any film with only one actor or character, so I'll have to kind of like not really have an answer on that one, if I'm completely honest. There's no film to me that I thought, oh, that's great, that's only ever had one actor, so sorry, I can't really answer that one. And then the final question from this John is, what is the worst film that I've ever seen? Now, the worst film that I've ever seen that I've done on the channel, I would say, is a movie called The Hospital from 2013, which to date is the lowest score I've ever given a movie. And I can normally find some positives with films. I'm of the view where, it takes a lot of people to make a film, and sometimes, some aspects might not be particularly strong, but some might be well. But this movie, there's nothing that works. So that way, I would say, is probably my worst film, certainly that I've reviewed. I mean, before I did the channel, I may have seen some more terrible films that I simply can't remember. But because I've kind of put on record what I thought about all the films I've seen since I've done the channel, this is the one. So that's my answer, The Hospital from 2013. Okay, the next question is from Lathe of Heaven, who is a quite consistent commentator on the channel, so obviously thank you for your support. And he's asked a number of questions. Have I ever seen Child's Play from 1972? So this is not the Chucky movies. The short answer is I have not, I'm sorry to say. Next question is, do I like giallo films? I have enjoyed some giallo films throughout the years, but they've never been like a favourite kind of subgenre, to be honest. I like them well enough, but there's never been one that that was one that's really kind of stood out to me. So yeah, I kind of like them, but they've never been like a favourite genre. What do I think of Event Horizon, which was the science fiction horror movie that starred Sam Neill? Scared the shit out of me. I saw that at the cinema, and yeah, it actually was like pretty freaky. So yes, I enjoyed that one quite a bit, and I think I've seen it a few times. But seeing it at the cinema, seeing a horror film at the cinema, to me, certainly when I was younger, was always quite a kind of scary experience. Do I like the movie Legend of Hell House? I have actually seen that. Stars Roddy McDowall. But it's been a long time since I've seen that one. Maybe I'll kind of go back and watch that. It's hard to give it too much context of that because I know I've seen it, but I don't remember a lot about it. But I remember liking it, enough. What do I think of Reanimator and its sequels? I really like the Reanimator films, and these films maybe a fan of Jeffrey Combs, who I always kind of think of as a contemporary to kind of Bruce Campbell. Those two guys are kind of like, horror icons in many ways. And Reanimator, I always think is his kind of signature kind of role. So yeah, I enjoy them quite a bit, and I understand there's going to be a remake, and I'm not against remakes, to be honest. What is my favourite subgenre? Two specific ones here: aquatic creature features. Obviously stuff like Jaws, but I also like actual kind of monsters and stuff like aquatic horror. I always have somewhat of a fear of kind of you know, what's lurking beneath the surface, because you never really know, you know, what's kind of beneath you if you're out in the sea and stuff like that. So it's that kind of, that fear of it, and obviously I like watching films that kind of exploit that. But I also like kind of haunted house movies. In particular, I would say haunted buildings, because I really like haunted hospital movies. I know that's a very specific, but I really kind of enjoy those movies. So, aquatic creature features and haunted buildings, should we call it. Do I prefer Alien or Aliens? And I know you thought I would prefer Alien, but I actually like Aliens better. As I said in the previous question, it's horror. Obviously I love horror, but it's not the only kind of genre that I like. And I like science fiction and action as well, and that incorporated many aspects. And to be honest with you, I think the characters were really good in the Aliens film. I mean, I really like Bill Paxton in that film. I really like Michael Biehn, and you know, of course, Sigourney Weaver, along with loads of the other cast. I think they had really kind of strong characters. And I don't personally feel that the characters are as memorable in the first Alien movie, even though it's a great science fiction horror movie. And then we move on to Screenstars. Screenstars, of course, a big contributor, as I've already mentioned. If I could choose 5 horror characters to go into the Big Brother house, who would they be? So if you're not familiar with Big Brother, it's essentially a reality TV show where a number of strangers kind of go into like a house, and you see how you would get on and all this kind of thing, and there's various kind of challenges and stuff like that. Now, horror icons, obviously I'm not going to pick things that might kill me. So although I kind of quite enjoy some of these kind of horror characters, I don't know if I want to live with the house of them. So I've chosen maybe characters who wouldn't want to slice and dice me, to be honest. So I would go with Ash, specifically from Evil Dead 2. That to me is the peak Ash Williams. I'm not so much of a fan of him in like Evil Dead, the Ash versus the Evil Dead, and the series, and even Army of Darkness, to be honest. So Ash from Evil Dead 2. Peter Vincent from Fright Night, who was kind of a horror host there. Vlad the Impaler, but pre-Dracula. In this instance, he'd be able to speak English. I'd be able to communicate. So I think that would be super interesting. And if he's just in the Big Brother house, he's unlikely to impale me. But I'd find that kind of quite interesting. I've always been quite interested in the historical side of kind of Dracula. Then it will be Laura Bellows, who is from Dracula 1972. Played by Carolyn Monroe, one of my earliest kind of screen crushes, I would say. I really fancied Carolyn Monroe when I was younger, as I'm sure most people did, and I always liked her in this role, even though she wasn't in a huge amount. And then the last one would be, actually we're talking about characters here, Sturber, played by Sybil Danning from The Howling 2. So long as it's not over, Big Brother didn't fall over a full moon, because then you'd be in trouble. And that's because, well, she's sexy as hell. And that's the answer to that one. Okay. Next question from Aaron is, what are the top 5 favourite films you've reviewed on the channel? So I'm going to kind of slightly adjust this. So I've reviewed some films like Evil Dead 2 that I've liked for a long time. So I'm not going to say films that I could have had previously liked. I'm only going to take this as films that I have liked, I've watched for the first time since doing this channel, if that makes sense. So this is as follows. I would say, in no real order, Turbo Kid, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic movie made as if it was kind of made in the 80s, and it's a really fun science fiction adventure with kind of a retro feel with some great kind of characters. Next up we have The Borderlands, which is also known as Final Prayer. This is a truly creepy found footage movie. I always try and kind of promote this movie whenever I get the chance, because if you want to be kind of like unsettled, if you want to find a movie that is genuinely kind of creepy, check out the Borderlands, aka Final Prayer, if you're in America. So kind of found footage movie. It is fantastic. Next up we have Avenged, which is also known as Savaged. This is a kind of a cross between The Crow and I Spit on Your Grave. Is about a woman who is kind of like murdered and raped and then murdered and stuff, and comes back as a kind of like an undead avenging force. Next up we'll have 47 Meters Down, which was an incredible shark movie, and outside of Jaws, this to me is the best shark movie. And that quote was actually even on one of the trailers in America when I reviewed it, so I was kind of pleased about that. And number 5 will have a mainstream movie, and that will have to be Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is my favourite out of the Marvel films to date. Even now in 2023, it's still my kind of favourite Marvel film, and that obviously came out whilst I was doing the channel. So Aaron, thank you for the questions, and of course again thank you for your continued... Okay, so next question is from Diabon Donaldson, and he asked my top 10 films I've given bad reviews to, but I've only going to give 5 because this was quite a hard question, to be honest. Because bad films that I've given good reviews to would say to me that films that I think are knowingly kind of not good, but I still kind of enjoyed, and without kind of trawling through all my reviews, it's difficult to sometimes remember all these. So I'm going to give you 5, yeah, so there you go. So the first one is Ghost Hunters, which is an asylum movie directed by Perry Reginald Teo, who actually appears twice on this list, and is essentially a kind of movie where the premise of Ghostbusters is essentially taken in a different direction. Let me just kind of put it like that. Next up we have The Curse of Sleeping Beauty, which is also directed by Perry Reginald Teo. And he has a kind of a style which is, the best way I would describe it, as a B-movie director, but who kind of models himself over James Wan, I would say. And both of those films kind of will remind you of a B-movie James Wan. Next up we have Playing with Dolls 2, Bloodlust, and this one is also directed by a B-movie director who I quite enjoy, but I know that they are critically not particularly strong, Renny Perez in this case, and he's directed quite a few films, and all of which are not particularly good movies, but many of them I enjoy just for kind of like schlocky entertainment value. And Playing with Dolls is kind of like, I suppose, his best known sort of slasher series, and yeah, the second one to me I thought was the most fun in some respects. Next up we have Big Bad Rat, which is a more recent one, and yeah, it's essentially a B-movie about a huge kind of killer rat that's kind of, you know, going around eating people in a kind of a summer camp. You've got Felicia Rose in that, along with a couple of other kind of familiar faces. And then last off, we're going back in time, like an older movie. I'm a huge fan of the kind of the fantasy kind of sword and sorcery genre, and there used to be a lot of these in the 80s. And Amazons is one which I think is probably one of the better examples of those movies that is kind of fun, but still, you know, no one's going to say it's a good, well-made, critically loved and lauded movie, but I still kind of liked it. So there's 5 for you. Then we've got a question from Cos131. What are my music preferences, particularly harder metal? So I have made a video about kind of heavy metal previously. Yeah, I used to be a huge kind of metalhead back in my teens and kind of 20s. I, you know, had long hair, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, I kind of sat traditionally, I would say, on like traditional metal. But I did like some kind of like heavier stuff as well. I was in the heavier bands that I'm interested in, although I was interested in was particularly Obituary, Cradle of Filth, Death, which are actually I'm planning to see in 2023, albeit obviously not with Chuck Schuldiner there, but their kind of current lineup. They're playing in the city where I live, so I'll be seeing them this year. And then yeah, Motley Crue. So yeah, so I kind of like the odd kind of heavier band here and there, but they were my kind of I suppose heavier. Clearly not Motley Crue. He asked the second question, have I seen Savage Harvest from 1981? I don't think I have. I might be getting confused with another movie, which I have seen. But I had a look at this, and I don't think I have. But it does look quite cool, actually. So I might well check that one out. Number 9, ninth person, Matt versus movies. What edition of a film would you like to purchase? So I've actually got a lot of the kind of my grail editions, if you kind of want to call it like that. You know, a lot of the films and editions of films that I've ever wanted, I've actually managed to get. So there's not like any kind of massive gaps that I'm kind of wishing I had. The only one I would say is there is a bust edition from The Punisher 1989, which is a German kind of release, but it's a grey release. So kind of like, you know, it's basically like a scaled down version of the Punisher, well, a gun with the Punisher logo on the handle, which again wasn't in the actual movie. I don't think it's an official release. In actual fact, I don't actually think it comes with the film, but I think people sell it with a version of the film. So, you know, because it's quite expensive. I'm kind of like, I mean, the German market is flooded with grey releases. You know, not officially licensed, not necessarily bootleg, but you know, grey releases. So I don't know if I want to spend a lot of money on a grey release, to be honest. I might well get it one day. There are a few other kind of like things that I wouldn't mind getting. The Spider-Man 3, the wheat version, for example. They've released Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron on wheat. I'll probably pick that, but they're not like grail releases for me necessarily. But that Punisher one, I would like to have it, to be honest. But like I said, it's kind of one where I feel a little aggrieved spending more than £100 on that, if I'm honest. Number 10, Marta Vasquez. What do I do in my spare time, she asks. And this is it. You're actually watching what I do in my spare time. This YouTube channel is my hobby. I mean, a couple of people have kind of tried to tell me, oh, I do this as a profession. I don't. This is my hobby. I do work full time. I have a full-time job, nothing to do with YouTube. So this is actually my hobby. And you know, it's probably the thing outside of work that I spend the most time doing, because I feel like this is like a creative output for me. It might not be art, it might not be actual filmmaking, you know, itself, but to me, I still feel like I'm making something and I'm putting it out there that other people watch. So I feel like I am in a creative endeavour, if that makes sense. This is my main hobby. Outside of that, I do collect movies, various kind of editions and stuff, although I am kind of like cutting down a little bit on that, down to space and obviously the increases in the cost of living and such. You know, other than that, you know, the normal stuff kind of going out, although these days I don't kind of go out like drinking or stuff like that as much as I used to. Next up, she asks, what is my favourite Spanish language or kind of Latino movie? And I would give you two. First one I would say is Terrified, which was a really good, genuinely quite scary kind of movie, I have to say, about kind of parallel dimensions and kind of creatures that live within that. And then another one I watched relatively recently, I think last year, was Valley of the Dead, which is to do with the kind of the Spanish Civil War, but it's a sort of zombie movie. But it was a pretty good movie, to be honest with you. Both of them are, you know, in the Spanish language. Sally Wagenblatt asks, do I think there will ever be an official sequel to Zombie Flesh Eaters, picking up where the original film left off? Now, arguably, you can say there's been certainly unofficial remakes, and even, you know, arguably Zombie Flesh Eaters is a kind of an unofficial sequel to Night of the Living Dead, you might even argue. But as to an official sequel, do you know what? I think that one day there could be. And the reason I say that is, over the last years, we've seen an increase in sequels of movies that were released years ago, because obviously the film industry likes a sure thing. They like to have a franchise where there's an inbuilt fan base for it that will get online chatter. And this is the problem with when you make new IP. So I think that they well could be, and I can't imagine like the rights would be particularly kind of expensive for that. So I would say, although I don't necessarily think this one specifically is guaranteed, you know, we've seen a kind of a recent continuation from the Blind Dead series. So I wouldn't kind of rule it out, if I'm honest. I wouldn't rule it out. And I would watch it. Hell yeah, I would watch it. Number 12, and this is a name that I'm probably going to mispronounce. Gaga Shidiike X. Do I use a VPN for the films that I review? The majority of the movies that I review are actually sent to me by PR companies, by the actual filmmakers themselves, or by distribution companies as a screener. That's how I get the majority of the stuff that I watch. In actual fact, I'm sent stuff that I never get round to watching a lot of the time, because I get sent quite a lot. So that tends to be the bulk of what I kind of watch, to be honest with you. In actual fact, I mean, I get a lot these days, and it's affected my the amount I go to the cinema, even, because, you know, I get so many films sent to me. I don't know, going to the cinema seems an unnecessary expense to a certain degree, because I get so many movies to get sent anyway. But I do watch other, you know, some movies by other means. Sometimes I'll buy obviously the physical addition to them. Sometimes I'll watch something on streaming, or even sometimes on YouTube, things like that. And then they also ask, what editor do I use? So I use currently one called Movavi. I don't actually know how you pronounce it, to be honest. And that one I've used probably now for the last 2 or 3 years, I would say. But I used to use an older version of Windows Movie Maker. Now, I had an older PC, and the version on that one was quite good. You know, it's quite good. But then I got a new PC, and the newer version of Windows Movie Maker, was nowhere near as good. So I wanted to get a different program, and I was kind of reading reviews and stuff, and I got this one, which I think was about £50, something like that, and I got this one specifically because I wanted to be able to use drop-in effects. There was a company called Big Films that you could put explosions on and things like this. Turns out that I can't figure out how to actually use that, but I've got used to this kind of particular kind of editing tool now. So yeah, I've just kind of stuck with that. I'm fairly proficient with it now. Lucy asks, how did I come to feature other reviewers on the channel? So I think I've alluded to this at the beginning of the video. So when I made the channel, it was never intended to be like me, if that makes sense, one guy. I always wanted it to be a collaborative effort through different people. Initially, when I set up the channel, I did set it up, but I had two kind of friends who were, in real life around the area where I live, that were they're going to do it with me, but for whatever reason they kind of ended up not doing it, or not doing it very much. And then from there, I got to know people through the channel that I've either asked if they wanted to contribute, or they've asked me if they could contribute, and that's basically how I've kind of done it. So I like to hear different voices. I like to have different styles and stuff. So it's just ended up being the kind of the way that it is. And also, as I've kind of mentioned, so I get sent a lot of screeners. I don't have time to do them all. I like to put out content on a quite consistent basis. And if it wasn't for these contributors, I wouldn't be able to kind of get around to doing some of these films. So being able to kind of spread the load, so to speak, allows me to put constant content up, and I try to put at least one video a day, you know, these contributors help me be able to do that. Also asks, what advice would I give a new movie review channel? I mean, this is a weird one for you to answer in a way, because I don't feel like I'm like the movie channel guru. There is lots of kind of movie channels that are a lot bigger than I am. But if I had to give some advice, it takes time to kind of get into the swing of things. You know, I think sometimes people get into YouTube thinking, and they're not necessarily even be just for reviews, but just doing it, and they think it's going to be, they're going to get instant stardom, or they're going to start making money, like loads of money straight away, and it doesn't. Well, it doesn't very often. More often than not, it's a bit of a grind. So it takes time. So be prepared to put in the work, and you know, eventually your channel will go. You know, like I say, this is 10 years now. I'm on 23,000 subscribers, something like that. That's how long it's taken me to get that far. So there's that. But I would also add to this, be able to take criticism. Throughout when I've started doing this channel, people have sometimes said, I didn't like the way you do that. Now, a lot of people will kind of take this as trolling, but I mean, sometimes it is, but sometimes I will, you know, even if it might sometimes be a troll, if it's something constructive, I'm still willing to listen. So let me give you some examples. So when I started first doing these the reviews, someone said to me I was talking about the plot for too long, and you know, it wasn't it was somewhat of a troll comment. It wasn't like a kind of, oh, you know, you wasn't like, oh, here's my constructive feedback. There was a little bit of a troll comment, but they were right. So I changed it. So now I really don't speak about the plot all that much. I kind of give you a brief plot synopsis, and then I'll move on. And you know, I see a lot of particularly kind of like amateur, or let me say, like review channels who do a review, but all they'll do is, like, for 70% of the review, just going to recycle the plot. And it makes sense, because they think, okay, if you've seen the film, you don't need me to recycle the plot. If you haven't seen the film, you don't need a blow-by-blow kind of report about what actually kind of happens, because you want to watch the film. So there's no need for it. So another kind of like person said to me, my intro was too long. And again, I thought about it and thought, do you know what? They're right. So I cut it down. I mean, I remember my intro was 16 seconds. And someone said, oh, do you know, it's too long. And I didn't think 16 seconds was too long. But I thought, do you know what? If that's the way people are feeling, maybe I'm wrong. So I cut it down to about 10 seconds. So be prepared to take criticism. I actually, and I tried, I won't say who it was, but I tried to give some feedback to a channel, and they were doing these, what are they called, like mystery boxes, oh, the horror pack, I think it's called. And like, the video was about 11 minutes, and for 8 of those minutes, this person was just telling me about horror pack, and telling me that, you know, oh, you pay this amount of much, I mean, and you get this and that sort of thing. But well, for a start, you are not horror pack, right? You don't need them to sell it for you, and I'm sure they're loving it. But I'm sure people who are watching, and by no means offence, like a kind of a small channel doing a horror pack unboxing, they don't need to be told every single time about how it works. If you want to say it, make it like under a minute, under 30 seconds, and then kind of spend the most of the time on the unboxing. Because this person was like, out of an 11-minute video, was like 7-8 minutes, kind of just telling you the kind of the basis about how horror pack works. And this was a person who does it every month. And I sort of tried to be as constructive as I possibly could. I wasn't trolling. I just sort of said, look, bit of feedback. Maybe you would consider kind of maybe, you know, just kind of limiting the amount of time that you spend there. And then I just noticed the comment was deleted. So, you know, he didn't take it well. So there you go. But my advice is to be able to take some criticism. Think about how you structure a review. So for me, I'll kind of do, for example, this is just how I do it. I'll do like an intro, I'll do kind of like a brief plot synopsis. I'll add any kind of things like cast or any background to the movie. I'll do what works, I do what doesn't work, and then I give a score. That's kind of my structure. And that's what I would suggest people, not necessarily my structure, but have an idea about how it goes, purely because then you can kind of uniform your reviews and make it visually interesting. I mean, a talking head is great if you're kind of not particularly technically apt, but if you can put visuals on there, clips, screenshots and stuff like that, you know, make it visually interesting. You are allowed to use things under fair use to a certain degree. Next is Dante's. What keeps me motivated and keeps me wanting to carry on? I enjoy it, quite frankly. I've often seen people saying they kind of get burnt out, they get fed up, they end up quitting. But I'll be honest with you, I've never felt like that. I've never kind of felt like, oh, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I enjoy it. I enjoy doing this. Like I've said previously, this is to me as a creative outlet, and I feel like I'm making something, you know. And I enjoy the process. I enjoy listening to people's feedback and what they think of it. And Kind of never felt burnt out. So for me, it's just enjoying what I'm doing, and that kind of keeps it kind of interesting for me. I suppose if I were to do a YouTube channel on something that I felt would be successful but not what I enjoy, then maybe it would become a bit of a lurk. Number 15, and I didn't write the person's name on this, so my apologies. What twists would I like to see in the zombie movie genre? I would like to see a really scary zombie movie. I mean, zombie movies have been done a lot, and it's rare that I find a zombie movie that could be legitimately scary. So I think a zombie movie, then they're having one or two. Even like The Walking Dead, I think is kind of can be kind of scary. But where you feel like our protagonists are in genuine peril, and it's done in a way, it's filmed in a way that's suspenseful, moody and creepy, and you get those scares. That's what I would like. In regards to, next thing I would say is maybe good story ideas. I'll use an example. There's a zombie movie called It Stains the Sand Red, and that had a kind of somewhat of a unique idea, where this woman was pursued by a single zombie, but she was essentially kind of trapped. She was like walking across the desert, so she didn't really, you know, she had to deal with the elements. This zombie would not stop. It's not dying of thirst. It's going to keep on going. So she had to kind of will herself to kind of get away from this thing. It's like essentially an unstoppable force. But she has to deal with all the kind of the elemental issues as well, which I thought was good. I would like to see a film maybe where, and again, all this has kind of somewhat been touched on, where the zombie virus evolves. Now, The Walking Dead, for example, you had the Whisperers. And I know it's based on the comics, and I know this is how it was in the comics, but to me, it would have been far more interesting if the twist, and spoilers for Walking Dead if you hadn't watched it, but basically that we had this kind of gang of people that were wearing like masks and pretending to be zombies to mix in, and they used to kind of whisper to each other to communicate. And at first people thought it was the zombies doing it, but of course it was just people. But it was like, it would be interesting to see the zombies evolve, rather than, it's another group of people who have got like ill intent towards our protagonists. It's not like The Walking Dead has ever had a group of people who have a particular kind of like ill intent towards them. It's just like, it's more of the same. Who would I like to see direct such a film? I actually don't really have favourite directors, to be honest with you. You know, there's not one director where I have liked all their films consistently. So a director who can do a genuine scary like movie. Horror movie fan. What YouTube trends that involves movies or review movies do I not like? And this is the final question. I don't like reaction videos. God, I don't like reaction videos. And then finally, I would say the last part of that is in regards to if you are reviewing something, and if it's good or bad, is be constructive. I think it's not helpful if you just say, oh, that film was crap. But why? Why specifically is it crap? I mean, what was crap about it, because there's hundreds of people that work on a film, by saying it is crap or something, or even if it's great, you know, you're just saying everyone involved in that film either did a good or a bad job. And to me, you know, a film is made up of various different components, some of which might have been done well, some of it might not have been done well. But I think it's important to look at the various elements of what works and what doesn't work in each production and give praise or criticism based on that. Because it's not fair if I just say a film is rubbish, but let's say, for example, the music was really good, or the editing was excellent, or the camera work, or there was one actor who was like standout in it. If I just make a sweeping statement and say it's rubbish, I'm discounting everyone involved in that film, and that's just not the way I feel criticism should work. So that is my answer to that one. Sorry, it's a bit long-winded. So after this video has gone on for ages, and I'm running out of battery, so I'll wrap it up. Thank you again for watching this if you've made it to the end, and again, appreciate anyone who has stuck around with the channel, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully for the next 10 years. Bye for now.